I'm so scared. Please come. Come and take me. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm scared. You will come and take me? These were some of the haunting last words of 6-year-old Hind Rajab. She said in a telephone call to rescuers trapped in her family's car in Gaza, surrounded by her dead relatives after the car caught on fire while they were fleeing Israeli forces. For more than 3 hours, she cried for help. The aid agency, after being denied entry to help her, lost contact with her, and she was eventually shot 355 times by Israeli forces. I will question before God on Judgment Day those who heard my daughter's cries for help and did not save her, Hind's mother, Wazam Hamada, said. May Hind rest in power. May her cries for help always haunt us. When he heard that it was Jesus coming along the road, he began to shout. Many told him to be quiet, but he cried even louder. Today's gospel lesson tells us. It's situated in the Gospel of Mark in a series of healing stories, close to Jesus calling the children towards him, and right before the entry into Jerusalem is this healing of Bartimaeus. Before we go any further, we already fixed the title. Now we're going to address the ableism in the text. Scriptures such as this have been used against people with disabilities, arguing that it's their lack of faith that keeps them from being healed. Not only is this theological abuse, it assumes that the reader knows what is best for the disabled person and/or what they want. Equating blindness with a lack of faith, as is done here, is violent and should be condemned. We have evolved from our ancient text, thanks be to God. And may we always evolve into societies and communities more free of ableism and more full of liberation. Amen? Back to our refrain. When Bartimaeus, who was without sight, heard it was Jesus on the road, he began to do what? He shouted. Many told him to be quiet, but he cried even louder. The word translated for shout here literally means to cry out like a raven. When Hind was trapped in a car by occupying forces, scared and alone, she cried. Much of the world did not hear her. Now kids, young adults, children, show of hands. How many times has someone told you to be quiet? All right, we're all guilty. Today, friends, is Children's Sabbath, an annual Sunday where we mark at the request of Marian Wright Edelman Children Defense Fund as a day to advocate for policies and practices that protect, affirm, and celebrate children. So when reading today's passage, I can't help but think of young children specifically, who often, when told to be quiet or wait, cry even louder. Okay, come on, the show's about to start, be quiet. I need some water. Hey, your sister just fell asleep. I have to go to the bathroom. Anybody been there? In our story, Jesus acts not like we traditionally do when someone cries out at inopportune times. And Jesus doesn't assume what Bartimaeus needs, though I can imagine he can tell that he is a person without sight. But rather, Jesus stops and takes the time to listen and react. On Thursday, Reverend Dr. Gustavo Gutierrez passed away at the age of 96. Dr. Gutierrez was known fondly as the father of liberation theology, the first theologian in the world to use the term liberation theology to contextualize the experiences of the poor and oppressed. Black liberation theology, Mujerista theology, queer theology, all can be attributed to Dr. Gutierrez's foundational frame of Jesus on the side of those who have been cast aside. Child liberation theology, a newer framework pioneered by Janet Pays and propelled by R.L. Stoller, calls us to claim that children are also an oppressed, marginalized, cast-aside group, and that our faith should have something to say about that. We know this all too well in this country, where 11 million children live in poverty. 1,600 children per day are recorded to be abused or neglected. And there is no child, teenager, or young adult that you know that knows a world without the sudden threat of deadly gun violence. And our Black children feel this more acutely, as they are 6 times more likely to die from gun violence than their white peers. We don't have enough time to talk about statistics about our global children, thousands living through famine, genocide, and war, but let us not think for a moment that our struggles are separate from theirs, and that the United States doesn't perpetuate such harmful conditions for children both domestically and abroad. Now, it's easy to restate facts, right? But as child liberation theology teaches, it asks us, how might we orient ourselves differently if we believed that though children are disempowered by our current legal, political, and social systems and structures, that children have inherent power within themselves, full stop. And that actually, God is a child too. When God took on human form, she came into the world as a baby. And Jesus, the forever child of God, is enshrined into that relationship of which we are called to be in the Trinity, forever a child. When we understand God as a child, we hold that children are of the same value and worth as us all. Child liberation theology, as all liberation theologies, requires that the ones seeking liberation, the ones you hear right now, in this case children, should be the ones that create the theology and their demands for justice. Did you hear that, kids? Did you hear that? You, she heard it. You are theologians. You're all theologians, and we need you to lead us. You are God to us. And when we don't listen to Hind, we don't listen to God. When we don't listen to Zeke, we don't listen to God. When we don't listen to the cries of a newborn, I promise that is right here, we don't listen to God. Now, I don't need to remind you all, except maybe in number, that we are 9 days from arguably the most important election of our lifetimes. Deep breath. If you're here in New York and you came through Midtown today, I see you, and I'm sorry. Early voting has begun in many states already. Raise your hand if you've already voted. Tell us in the chat. Woo, 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 woo. Politics, my friends, are about power, right? Who has it and how we orient ourselves as a society, how power and relationships are used or abused. Therefore, as people of faith, we should care about politics. And I'm asking myself in these last 9 days, what are the children saying? What do the children need? We canvassed in the Pennsylvania suburbs in early October, and it was actually maybe more tense than you can imagine. Like several of the doors we knocked on that day, no one answered. But as we were walking away from one, a young adult who appeared to be a cishet white male came up to us, seemingly appeared out of nowhere, and followed us to our car. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I saw you at my door." Oh, yes, we began to give our spiel. We're here volunteering. We want to know your voting plan. Oh, but I don't do politics, he said, brushing us off. I don't like any of the candidates. I'm not voting. Now, first, I reminded him, as I first heard former Senator Nina Turner of Ohio say that, friend, even if you don't do politics, politics do you. And furthermore, I said, I want you to look at these children, pointing to my brood of canvassers. They can't vote. There's not even an avenue for them to do it. And yet, they have needs and desires and hopes for this country and their schools and their cities just like you do. So when you wake up on November 5th, I want you to think about these kids, and I want you to vote for them. Get over yourself and vote for them. Now, let's think about it. That young man knew what we were doing, right? He saw our shirts. He saw our stickers, our flyers. He lives in Pennsylvania. His door has been knocked on 1,000,000 times. Why did he follow us out? Was there something in him that needed to be healed? That needed to be heard or agitated? I think there was. And I could not have proven my point without who? The children. Bring the kids was a common hashtag several years ago. I don't disagree. Bring the kids to all the things, because all the things need to be reminded of the endless possibility and hope of God. Bring the kids because we are better with you all in our presence. Bring the kids because your questions get us more free. Bring the kids because God is a child. And in so doing so, we bring and become more of God. Bring the kids because each one of us were once children. And your presence, children, is a reminder of who we are and who we've become. And don't just bring the children under your own roof, or this roof, as beautiful as it is. Bring the children of the whole world. Bring them in your hearts and in your minds as you live every day and as you vote 9 days from today. I love the upcoming holiday of Halloween. I leaned over and told Natalie these pumpkins are bringing me immense joy. No matter the origins of Halloween, how it's come to be in America today is a holiday centered on children, on their communal joy and creativity and imagination and trust. When else are we like, yeah, go to that door, knock on it, right? And voice. Trick or treat. We almost demand that children say. These children who aren't so calloused by the world that their imagination for equality can't run wild, aren't so bruised by aggression, be it micro or macro, so as not to taste freedom. These children who aren't so jaded by imperialism that they can't practice peace, aren't so exhausted by capitalism that they can't rest and play. Cry louder, children. Cry from your specific locations. Bartimaeus cried even louder when he was told not to because he knew he was worthy and that his desires and needs mattered. He knew he was worth attention and care, and so are you. So are we all. And as we are all worthy of being heard, we also ask together, whose cries aren't we hearing? And what's in the way? Who are we intentionally silencing? Who are we blocking from freedom and healing? And what do we need to do in order to keep crying when we've been silenced? And some of us, because of our social locations and identities, have been silenced for generations and are silenced still by the ills of patriarchy, white supremacy, ableism, classism. How do we keep crying? What restores us? Who helps us along the way? Whoever they are, those are our people. Find them, cherish them, be them. If you're conflicted about this election because you know without a shadow of a doubt that we must defeat this racist, convicted predator, lying, cheating Donald Trump, but you also know without a shadow of a doubt that you need the only other candidate able to win the Electoral College, Kamala Harris, to condemn global genocides in Gaza and call for an arms embargo now, because you know that children both in Palestine and Israel are suffering and that we must end this now. If you are conflicted about that, like I am, can you tell? Your people are the people who encourage you to cry louder, to demand more, to ask for healing all the way up to the voting booth. They're not the ones who say, stop talking about that and stop demanding that. If you're happy about a candidate's reproductive justice platform, but disappointed in their advocacy for trans rights, cry louder. If you're content in your job, but the aggressions are exhausting, cry louder. If you're a young person sitting here at middle, but you've never been asked how you are or how you like to spend your days, cry louder. I have a platform called Raising Imagination. Most people think the name derives from the nurturing and parenting of the imaginations of the children in my home. That's less than half the truth. Raising Imagination is a public claim about how I am changed by the presence of children, how my consciousness is elevated for the common good because of who they are. Like when my 3-year-old asked me why anyone has a gun. When my 7-year-old looked at the mural in the library and asked why the children didn't look like all the different skin colors she saw sitting around the library. When my 2-year-old pointed to a person sleeping on a box on the sidewalk and said, "Mama, why?" When my 5-year-old asked why someone would actually crash a plane into the Twin Towers. When my 4-year-old asked why her Nana died of cancer. When my 10-year-old asks why Manhattan is sinking. When just Friday night, my 8-year-old asked if Kamala Harris has called for an end to a genocide of Palestinians, and when I said no, she said, "Is there anyone else?" Cry even louder, Skylar. Now, we can't always answer the questions that children ask, can we? That concept is especially hard for white people because we're conditioned to think that we have to have all the answers and we have to have them quickly. But that's colonized parenting, not liberative. So what if we just let the questions live? What if we just let them be and sat with them and let them disturb our comfort? Let them inform our activism and our outrage. Let them raise our collective imagination. Cry louder, children. Cry louder as you seek and come closer to God, closer to community, closer to healing and care. Cry louder, disturb us with your questions, trouble us with your innocent dreams, so we all might cause good trouble. Yes, child, there is someone else. There's you. There's all of you. There's all of us. So go live and go love. Stand boldly and unapologetically in your power. All of us, children of God. Go. Your faith has made you well. Amen.